Valentine's Day session of City Council, February 14th, 2023. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Excuse me. Councilmember Harmon?
Here.
Councilmember Friedman?
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Alejandro Gutierrez?
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Here.
Councilmember Jordan is absent. And Mayor Rouse?
Here. Thank you. Ms. Bjork, are there changes to the agenda?
No, Mayor Rouse.
Okay, very good. Well, with that, we will go to public comment with 3 minutes at the dais for anything that is not on our agenda, but also within the purview of this council. And I see my first speaker is Celeste Barber. Ms. Barber.
Am I close enough? Can you hear me? Okay. Mayor Rouse, Council, Son. I just came straight from the film festival, and I just wanted to remind everybody that the festival is about halfway through. And just to let you know up there on the dais, as well as members of the community, that the festival is gifting the community free screenings at the Arlington Theater this year, every year. So there's ample room for everyone, and I hope that members of the community will take advantage of this. On Thursday at 2 o'clock, they'll be showing Patrick and the Whale. So imagine a wonderful documentary about sperm whales on the giant, beautiful screen in the Arlington Theater. So I encourage everyone to come out and support the film festival and see these free films, ample room. And last, happy Valentine's Day to all of you, and especially to my boy.
Thanks, Mom. Love you.
Well, how do you beat that? Are there any speakers online?
There is one online speaker, Aaron Ashland. Mr. Ashland, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your time. Number one, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to make you aware because I know how much you value the HLC and their standard. So I can't believe they tried to get away with this with you as the mayor, but there is a 150-foot long white picket fence right under our very noses. It's at least 4 or 5 times longer than any picket fences that were on the promenade, I assure you. This clear violation of everything HLC is surrounding the Goat Tree Cafe. Mr. Mayor, the patio expanded about 3 times the old size of their restaurant, but no mention from you about the Uniform Business Code and how they might have difficulties complying. Why is that, Mayor? Do you prefer businesses that aren't local or just ones that are owned by the hotels? Number 2, Councilman Friedman, you mentioned that we are spending too much attention on State Street, and I think you're a little mistaken, but I guess it depends on how you look at it. You see, we've figured something out. We know what State Street needs, so for us to not do it seems like we'd be half-assing that. And I guess my next example would be De La Guerra Plaza, which sits right in front of your guys' offices. We just spent or about to spend the same amount of money on consultants for what is maybe a quarter of a block versus all of State Street, which is like 8 or 9 or 10 blocks long. So I don't think we're really spending too much attention or money on State Street. Maybe you could say that about De La Guerra Plaza, but definitely not State Street. Number 3, Mr. Mayor, so now that our residents in MIG have made it clear what the city wants, do you think it's important to push your personal agenda to destroy the promenade? Or are you going to admit that you were wrong and hop on Team Santa Barbara with the rest of the 79% of the city? Number 4, I drove up State Street yesterday and noticed that almost every business from Capri to Haley has a sandwich board out. It seems like out-of-town businesses like Finney's have been given much less scrutiny and policing than we are getting on the promenade. Is that by design, Mr. Mayor? Are you trying to harm the businesses on the promenade and help the ones from out of town? Number 5, what is our homeless end game? Do you guys, what would we consider success? I don't believe that we have cured mental illness. So exactly what is our plan to protect our residents and visitors from things like were mentioned a couple of weeks ago by the man who owns the martial arts studio? I think we deserve a safe downtown, Mr. Mayor, don't you? Number 6, Santa Maria swore in 6 or 7 new police officers 2 weeks ago. Thought you'd want to know. Number 7, what about businesses? Would any of you allow a family member to start a business on State Street? Mr. Friedman, would you let your mother start a business? If she was working on State Street at night, would you feel safe? What about when she walked to her car at the end of the night? Would you let her? I'm not a martial artist, but like the man who spoke a couple weeks ago, I'm wondering what I would do if someone attacked me with a hatchet or one of my customers. Like, should I keep a bat, Mr. Mayor, or should I get a gun? What should I do exactly? Seriously, like, I'm not a martial artist. So if he comes and harasses me and attacks me and then spends the next week out in front of my business, like, what if I was too scared to come to work? Are you guys going to run my business for me? Well, that's the kind of things that are going on State Street, just so you know. Number 8, there was a guy who pulled out a knife on Saturday on the 600 block. The same man was out on the streets later that evening. Is this our idea of keeping
Okay,
the
you're out of
residents
time. Thank
safe?
you.
Okay, I'll call back next week. Thanks, guys.
All right, very good. Any further public speakers online?
There are no other speakers.
Okay, with that, we'll close public
Read.
comment and move to the consent calendar. You have some items to read?
I do. One moment. Yes, Mr. Mayor, there are 5 consent items to read. Item 1, zoning ordinance amendments for accessory dwelling units and local coastal plan resolution. It's an ordinance adoption and resolution. Recommendation is that Council A adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the Santa Barbara Municipal Code by amending Section 30.185.040 pertaining to regulations for accessory dwelling units. B, adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the Santa Barbara Municipal Code by amending Chapter 28.86 pertaining to regulations for accessory dwelling units. And C, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving a local coastal program amendment, PLN 2022-00391, to amend Title 28 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code, Chapter 28.86, to regulate accessory dwelling units in the coastal zone. Item 2, construction and operating agreement and reciprocal easements for Chase Palm Park and the future Waterfront Hotel. Ordinance introduction. Recommendation that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the city administrator to execute the declaration of construction and operating covenants and reciprocal easements by and between American Tradition LLC, RGC Santa Barbara Hotel LLC, and the City of Santa Barbara, a copy of which is on file with the Parks and Recreation Department. Item 3, amendment to Position Salary Control Resolution 22-064 with updates to classification and compensation for certain positions. Resolution. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Resolution 22-064, the Position Salary Control Resolution for fiscal year 2023, to amend the established salary for positions as listed and establish the principal architect position. Item 4, adopt a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara supporting a grant application to the California Coastal Commission for Airport Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. Resolution. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara supporting a grant application to the California Coastal Commission for Airport Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. And item 9, a consent public hearing on the 5-year Measure A local program of projects for fiscal years 2024 to 2028. Public hearing. Resolution. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the 5-year Measure A local program of projects for fiscal years 2024 through 2028.
All right, thank you very much. Does anyone on council need to pull an item for discussion? Are there any public commenters online to pull an item for discussion?
There are not.
Okay, with that, I will take potentially a motion for consent.
Move the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, moved by Harmon, second by Freeman. Here we have the,
Councilmember Harmon?
no, you're gonna,
Oh, I'm sorry.
come on.
New
get up to
new
the
AV.
21st century.
Yes, welcome to the 21st century. Okay.
And there we go. It passes unanimously, all present with Michael Jordan absent. All right. Move to the next item, please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good afternoon. I'm Brandon Bodette, Senior Assistant to the City Administrator, and today the item before you is a public hearing for the Santa Barbara South Coast Tourism and Business Improvement District. So the district itself, the boundaries are located between the Santa Barbara County, City of Glida, and City of Santa Barbara. It was formed in 2011 pursuant to the Property and Business Improvement District. Council can recall that they took a course of actions over the first part of 2022, where we changed and modified the plan as well as adopted a new 10-year plan. We also changed the assessment that went from a average daily room rate to a percent-based model. However, when we moved to start actually collecting, there was a little bit of confusion as to the terms specifically regarding resort fees. So the City of Santa Barbara met with the City of Glida and the county and the Visit Santa Barbara and decided the best course of action was to do some cleanup language. Put the new language in the new 10-year plan and move forward in that regard. So we moved forward with that process. A letter of requesting the modification was sent by Visit Santa Barbara to the city. We did a resolution of intention to modify back in January. Mailings were addressed to all the related businesses, and today before you, we have the public hearing to modify the district to include the new modified language. There were no protest votes received. regarding-
One minute, please, Mr. Widow. We have a procedural.
Yeah, sorry to
Could you go ahead
interrupt.
and read that into the record, please?
Yeah, I'm going to let the clerk read the title and of the matter into the record, and then let Mr. Bodette proceed. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Kovacs.
Thanks. So this is item 10, a public hearing. It's adoption of resolution and public hearing modifying the 2022 Management District Plan of the Santa Barbara South Coast Tourism Business Improvement District. It's a resolution, and the recommendation is that Council A, hold a final public hearing to modify the 2022 Santa Barbara South Coast Tourism Business Improvement Management District Plan and declare results of a majority protest proceeding, and B, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara modifying the 2022 Management District Plan of the Santa Barbara South Coast Tourism Marketing Business Improvement District.
Very good. Please continue, Mr. Bodette.
Okay, just so to do a recap, Mr. Mayor, basically we're making some modified language to clean up any language related to the resort fees included in the new plan. That's good for the next 10 years. Today is just a public hearing to make sure that that's modified and we can move forward with it. Again, there was no protest votes received regarding this language. It was just some cleanup language to make sure there was no confusion.
Very good.
And the recommendation before you that was just read is also in front of you.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Are there public comments on this item?
There are no hands raised online.
Okay, with that, we will entertain a motion.
Move the staff recommendation.
Move Friedman. Second by Alejandro Gutierrez. Very good. Passed unanimously with Michael Jordan absent. Thank you. Can you read the next item, please?
The next item is item 11, update on the De La Guerra Plaza revitalization project and agreements for architectural and lighting design services.
Very good, Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Brad Hess. I'm the Principal Project Manager for the City of Santa Barbara. And with me today for this presentation, I have Leif Mackay from RRM Design Group. Today, in addition to providing council with an update on the status of this project, we are recommending council approve 2 contracts. One for RRM Design Group for architecture and design services, and one for Ann Kale Associates for lighting design. Both contracts will provide services through the end of the project. We began this project, believe it or not, a little over 4 years ago, and much has happened. Today we'll be providing you with an update on where we are today. And as part of our presentation, I believe you'll understand that in spite of the time it has taken for us to get here, we have more work ahead of us than behind us. So here's our project update for our agenda for today. As was outlined in the council agenda report, we've approached this project as 5 separate projects listed here, each working together toward the whole, but each with complications, specific schedules, and needs. The update today is going to explain how far we've come, and then, through these different areas of focus, explain how much we have in front of us to accomplish. Technically, we are still in the concept phase of this project, though it feels like we are much further along because of all the work that it has taken to get the project details to where they are today. So as you may recall, this project began in January of 2019, and this slide gives you an overview of how involved this process has been, whether it be through the advisory committee with members of this council, the community outreach and stakeholder engagement, or the technical studies and guidance by committees, subcommittees, and Historic Landmarks Commission. It's been a steady march forward these past 4 years. We've gone through the PRT process with community development and are very close to submitting our planning application for the project. So Leif will now walk you through the architecture and landscape portion of the project.
That's on. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for having me today. I'm going to run you through a series of slides to illustrate the plaza design as it currently stands today. The graphic on the right is, I know it's not very legible, it's just there to describe the extents of the project. So it's basically the block of De La Guerra Street between Anacapa and State Streets, the landscape at the front of City Hall, Stork Placita, and of course the plaza itself in the center. This is a list of the more significant design features. Some of these will be quite transformative, such as closing the area to traffic and creating a wonderful people-oriented space. Others will enrich and enliven the space by fostering positive activity, including an interactive bubbler fountain to attract families, a stage for small performances, and casual seating. Next. This is a zoom in. It's more legible. It's the main plaza area right outside this building. It features a large unobstructed area that can be utilized in any number of ways, from informal social gathering hubs to a large festival such as Fiesta. There's a new structure proposed adjacent to the City Hall parking lot, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. A subtle water bubbler feature toward the News Press building end that's flush with the paving and can be turned off when needed. The western edge at the bottom of your screen is a green, shady zone with outdoor dining furniture and casual seating around the raised planters. There's also a new self-cleaning restroom proposed around the corner at the end of Stork Placita. You can just see it on the bottom right there, which is modestly sized for everyday use, not for an event. Next slide. We have a series of sort of illustrations to try to capture some of the character of the proposed space. This is the back of the cafes that currently flank the western edge of the plaza. You can see them on the far left there. This is going to be a tree-lined edge with olive trees in raised planters, as you can see there, that also double as seating. They're placed on sort of in an irregular way to add some interest and informality to the space. Looking down Stork Placida to State Street at the far end there, the News Press building would be on your left. You can see the new restrooms tucked in on the right-hand side there. So fairly modest building that's screened from view from most of the plaza. But everyone agreed through the process that restrooms were a necessity for the space. This is a slide looking towards the News Press, right down the middle of the plaza. You can see it's very open and able to be utilised in a number of ways. The water bubbler feature you see in the background there, that's the scale that we're talking about. It's fairly subtle, small bubblers that come out of the ground that children could interact with, and then when it's turned off, it's just flat plaza space. So back to the new structure I referenced earlier. This is where a new structure is proposed. It's between the plaza and the City Hall parking lot, just next to City Hall. This has been the focus of lots of conversation. We believe this is a very critical element for the plaza because it provides a sense of enclosure, which is typical of classical plazas. Screens the parking lot and provides quite an elegant backdrop for a new stage so that concerts and other performances can be oriented with this beautiful new structure in the background. It's under development. We've done more than this slide would lead you to believe, but to respect the process, we haven't been to HLC with it yet, so we're going to be going to them with some proposed designs in the next couple of weeks. And then finally, this was actually not a part of the original scope, but it was added partway through, and the point of this is to address the frontage of City Hall from Anacapa Street and to give it more civic presence as the City Hall. So we're trying to make it more of a front door presence by creating a modest-sized plaza, but that gives some stature to the front door. We'd relocate the flagpoles that are currently in the plaza proper around to the front and introduce seating, bike parking, and the landscaping is intended to be a demonstration site for Waterwise landscaping that the public could come and learn something about their own gardens.
Thank you, Leif. So public art has always been in the concept design criteria, but it has recently taken shape in a substantive way. We formed an art subcommittee to create and implement the process for soliciting and selecting artists for the project, and it has been a very exciting series of meetings with a very talented and diverse group. So there are three primary areas for artistic expression in the plaza: the central Chumash mosaic, the medallions, both small and large, and the family seating area. Excuse me. The smaller red dots indicate the small medallions that will be designed to draw people into the plaza from the three primary pedestrian entry points. And the orange dots indicate the locations for the larger medallions in the center area of the plaza. These will be inlaid into the surface materials in the ground, whereas the art in the seating area will be incorporated into the stone material used for the seating. So artists can submit proposals for more than one area, and we are excited to let you know that the theme for all of the art in the plaza will be earth, water, fire, and air. So back in April of 2019, Applied Earthworks conducted a Phase 2 archaeology dig, and these are some of the photos from that dig. And it was determined that a Phase 3 would be required for this project. And that Phase 3 work plan will be completed and submitted to HLC for review and approval in the coming months. And we anticipate the Phase 3 work to hopefully commence this summer.
I won't bore you too much with the utilities, but it's quite an important part of the project because we're really trying to upgrade the whole space to have the infrastructure to host all sorts of modern events. The picture on the left just is to allude to our concept, which is to have joint trenches running through the plaza underneath brick paving that can be removed and replaced again. And so it would be electrical, Wi-Fi, things like fiber, water and sewer, all designed to be running in the same corridors that can be accessed easily in the future. I'll show you a picture of the brick paving on the next slide, and then talk a bit about waste. So the shaded area on the plan it's essentially it would read as a pattern in the pavement to give some interest to the finished paving, but it actually is the way we're capping this joint utility trench. You can see on the top right what happens to public spaces over time. They become a hodgepodge of patchwork as you have to dig them up and replace them. So that's what we're trying to avoid in the future and make it a more easily maintained space. And then just to touch quickly on everyone's favorite topic, trash management, we've been exploring quite a unique way to deal with the volume of trash that the surrounding businesses are going to generate without taking up vital space on the ground with an unsightly dumpster enclosure. So we're exploring this technology here on the screen, which is essentially subterranean trash vaults that are hydraulic. So on the surface, they look like, on the left, it's just a trash chute essentially, like a laundry chute, and then underneath you have the dumpsters so that'll pop up, Marburg can come in and empty them, and then they go back down. So we're just basically trying to hide the trash and recapture as much space for people as we can.
So as we move forward, here are the milestones for the city's review process. And as the Historic Landmarks Commission is the governing body for this project, the process is fairly unique compared to other projects. As we get into the formal review of this project, the community will then have multiple opportunities to comment on the proposed design. Now, this slide is by no means an exhaustive list of milestones, but rather highlights some of the larger ones for the project. It's challenging to project these, quite honestly, because, well, quite frankly, nothing in this project has gone to the projected schedules. So, but we feel that these are reasonable and realistic goals to shoot for. So the ones to highlight, we're hoping to receive final design approval from HLC in the fall of this year. Hopefully receive our building permit about a year from now, and then starting construction in the summer of 2024 with a projected completion date in spring of 25. So once again, we're here for the approval of 2 contracts, and the staff is recommending approval for the RMM contract for architecture and design services, and for Ann Cale Associates, the First Amendment to their professional services agreement for lighting design. Thank you. Thanks for your time and for the opportunity to bring you all up to speed on this very important and exciting project. And we are available for questions.
All right, very good. Questions from council. Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Before I ask, just 2 brief questions, but I just want to remind council who is on the De La Guerra Plaza Advisory Subcommittee that it has members of council, Harmon and Snedden, 2 members of HLC, Michael Drury and Steve Howes, Planning Commissioners Leslie Wiscombe and Sheila Lodge, a member from the Historic Trust, Ann Peterson, 2 from Parks and Recreation, B.B. Longstreet and Kathy McGill, and Sam Edelman from the Farmers Market is always invited. He's a standing member, but he hasn't attended, but the open invitation is there. So just as a reminder of who the committee is that's been advising on the design to date. But the questions I have, just two, for the future milestones, when and where will the art concepts be heard or seen? Will that come back to the advisory committee, or will that be part of the HLC? Or at what point do we get to see the outcome of those?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Sneddon, if you look on this, we're hoping for the summertime for the request for qualifications to go out. Right now, we're working on that. In the meantime, though, a memo to the advisory committee will go to the advisory committee to determine if we need to discuss that RFQ in person or not. So that is forthcoming, or that will be coming to you soon. From the RFQ, the hope is that we will have a kickoff event for this project that will be a little bit more meaningful than just a piece of paper. So stay tuned for that, but that will hopefully correspond with the art and how that is revealed. I can't really answer your question specifically, though, because that process really hasn't been determined by the art subcommittee yet.
Okay, so when that process, and I understand that that's what's happening in the subcommittee, when the process for that is recommended, will that come back to the advisory committee, or will that be incorporated in the HLC?
They will come to you as in the advisory committee,
Okay.
and then we will also be informing HLC of that process, so they're aware.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure we got to see that again, because it's pretty exciting, I think,
is.
that particular element. And then will these two contracts, well, one contract is for the lighting, and I don't think we've really had a presentation of the lighting concept, so it might be helpful to give a little bit more detail about what some of that lighting might incorporate, so that we understand what we're approving for the contract. But then will these contracts include incorporating the art recommendations? Is that part of this contract with RRM?
Yes. Both contracts will include that, and the reason for the lighting design basically stalling out in process is because the design kept changing. Specifically, the building that is between City Hall and the News Press. There are just so many ways that the lighting can go that until we actually had the design a little bit more settled, it made sense for Ann to just sit quiet. So absolutely, that will be part of the next wave of design iterations.
And this contract will cover
Yes.
the specifics of the lighting for the plan that's decided on?
Yes,
Okay.
it will.
Those are my questions. I'll save my comments for after. Thank you.
All right, further questions from council? Okay, I had a couple questions. Can I have the site back up on the screen, please? Okay, so as I look at this, and as I saw the other picture from the front of City Hall, so there's vehicular traffic on that first half of De La Guerra that goes to the plaza now? You had some parking, I think, designed there?
Mr. Mayor, yes, that's, there is, I think about 8 spaces shown for City Hall parking for people to come and drop off a bill and stuff like that. It would be short-term parking, and it would be controlled with traffic control devices at either end. So
All right.
in a big event, there could be no cars there, but on a day-to-day basis, there'd be short-term
All right,
spaces.
very good. If we go back to the other drawing. Curious, so there's no vehicular traffic now at all within the plaza, is that correct by this design?
Correct.
And considering that those businesses on the building down below, the front State Street, half of those businesses front State Street, half front De La Guerra Plaza, what are we going to do about deliveries for those businesses?
Mr. Mayor, it's a great question because it's something that we have been not only just aware of, but concerned about. And so I've had multiple conversations with Derek Bailey and in transportation. They've reviewed this. Right now, there's basically 3 options when this design is implemented. One would be the loading and unloading space that is basically at the arcade next to City Hall, just off of Anacapa Street. Second would be on Ortega Street, Ortega and State. You'd have both intersections from which to work and come up. The third would be Canna Perdido coming down. And right now, the fourth would be, depending on how things work with the State Street Advisory Committee and what happens between Ortega and Canna Perdido, we could potentially have State Street deliveries, say, before 9 or 10 a.m., so that those are easier drop-offs. But it's definitely going to be a new normal for the delivery folks and the pickups.
Well, I know that over the years, we've tried to time these deliveries and whatnot, and with businesses, especially supply companies saying you're going to get it when you get it, that hasn't always worked out. The bollards that block off the traffic from coming onto the plaza, are those retractable or are they fixed?
Mr. Mayor, it's, we're not sure yet. They'll be removable for sure. Whether they retract into the ground is to be determined.
I'm just curious about fire's access into that plaza to fight a fire within those plaza-facing buildings. Okay. And when you and I talked, Mr. Hess, at one time, because I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool to do like permeable pavers, yada, yada, but we would have to excavate too far to do that, was what I was understood from before. And now we're planning for these underground utilities, bubble pool with plumbing and whatnot. So, and I know you guys have done your excavations, since you've got an idea what's under there, approximately where it is. But I'm just kind of curious, because at one point in time, I know to do the permeable pavers, we would have to excavate down quite a bit further than to do traditional paving. So is there a difference that I'm missing there, or is that something change?
Mr. Mayor, it's a great question, because it would naturally come up if you look at the brick. The reason for not using permeable pavers wasn't because of the over-excavation. It was actually because there's no percolation in this plaza.
Okay.
It's such solid clay that the water just doesn't go anywhere. So our water management plan will basically be how to collect the water into large cisterns and use it hopefully for landscaping. So that's when it's actually there. When it's not there, we'll use commercial water for the landscaping. But the brick will account for some of the water, because it will naturally seep in there, because we're not going to be grouting the brick. But the rest of it, because it won't perk, you're going to be using permeable pavers.
Right, I wasn't locked in the permeable pavers. I was just kind of curious, because that's how I remember the conversation, but obviously not. Okay, last question. As you looked at the traditional uses of De La Guerra Plaza, different kind of events and whatnot, it looks like this design would preclude a lot of that. Is that, am I missing that on the design, or were those considered in when you guys laid this out? Maybe that's a Mr. McKay question, I'm not really sure.
I'll try to answer that, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe it precludes anything. It's actually more open and usable than it is today, because there's one uniform surface with no curbs. We've met several times with Old Spanish Days to sort of talk to them about how their event, which is the biggest kind of resident event, I suppose you could say, how their event would lay out. They're actually quite excited about it. It would necessitate some changes to the way they do things, like the way they orient their dancing performances and stuff, but they were excited about the potential. So we feel like it's quite flexible and open, and would accommodate most things we could conceive of.
And then my last question is, the underground trash containers, where would you anticipate those going? The ones that came up, and I noticed it wasn't on a site plan, it was just kind of an idea.
But they're on this plan. They're one right there. Can you sort of on the bottom end of De La Guerra Street?
Okay.
And then the other one would be in a similar location in Stork Placita. The point being that's we talked to Marburg about how they may access in and out, and that seemed to be a good place to put them, that provided access to the businesses, and if they're coming up and down State Street. So that's the plan for those.
And they would have to access that with their trucks on State Street at a prescribed hour then. That'd be the idea. Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. Just to, if you could pull up slide 11. Just wanted to follow up on how deliveries or others could access. So what's preventing the possibility, if you look at that, in the drawing, there's a van at the very top of De La Guerra, and then what would be preventing at a certain time of day delivery trucks from just going further up to De La Guerra where they go now, and then coming out and then putting the bollards back up in the afternoon?
Thank you, Councilmember. I think what you're asking is, could there be a delivery spot where that van is parked in the rendering?
Actually, further up, kind of where they are now, like closer to State Street.
Oh, I
Like
see.
right in front of the businesses there, where they would actually drive onto the plaza. But if it's in the morning when it's not being used, primarily like in an afternoon event.
I'll give it a go. It's more of an operational question than anything else. I mean, there'd be ways to physically allow for that. We've shown currently those, you can see the bollards there that would prohibit that, but they could physically be made to be removable. We're not sure how realistic it is because of the intermittent timing of those vehicles, like FedEx coming all hours of the day. That may be a bit hard to manage in reality, but.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedman. I think I would also look at it as one of the driving directives that we received from the advisory committee was unanimity that this is a pedestrian-only plaza. So that's why in order to get over to State Street, I think the route would be State Street and not go through the pedestrian-only space.
Okay. Thank you. I was just curious as to why at a limited time of the day you couldn't do it, but that's helpful. And just on the water feature, you said it's minimal, but there'd be times, like say we have events like Fiesta or there's other community events that take place, we could turn the water off and that would become programmable space or usable space that doesn't have water in it, so it would be completely dry, so you could use it for community events.
That's correct.
And then my last question, on the restroom, how would those work? There's different models, but would that be like you pay, you go in, you leave, and it cleans itself, like some of them in Europe, or how do you envision it being a self-cleaning restroom? And then also, with restrooms, one of the issues is maintaining them and not making them become attractive nuisances. So can you explain a little bit more about how the self-cleaning restroom would work and whether or not it would be pay or not?
Yeah, that's a good question too. There's been no talk about payment. So at this moment in time, it would be free public restrooms. The way this particular product works is it's basically a retrofit kit. So we're going to build a custom shell that's in keeping with the architecture of the context, but it's quite modern. So what it does is it's all computerized and it flushes. It's got a series of jets with disinfectant that flush it out at whatever interval you set. It could be based on the number of flushes, every however many flushes, it basically, the door closes, sprays all the surfaces down, and then it doesn't eliminate janitorial services, but it does sanitize it frequently.
So it would just, at a certain time, and then it would fluctuate once the door is closed again, then it would go in and it would clean automatically, and so it would keep the upkeep on there.
Exactly, and there's another feature that it has where after a certain amount of time, the doors will open. And you set that time as well, but it prevents people just going in there, locking the door, and staying there.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, are there any further questions? If not, do we have any public speakers online, Madam Clerk?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, very good. And well, with that, it's back to council. Oh, Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I just want to make a few comments and then happy to move this forward if it's time for that. I just have to say that working with RM and with Leif McKay in particular is very responsive and a lot of iterations of input and stakeholder lists. And I just really want to highlight this stakeholder list that we've met with so far, and including even that nearby businesses. So they may not be happy with every aspect of the plan, but their input has been considered, and the news press representatives have been invited, and they're invited to give input as well. That question always comes up because they're a major stakeholder on the plaza. But also with Old Spanish Days, mentioning all of those meetings, and it's very much designed with them in mind. And every step along the way, would this work for you, and how would this work best for you, including where the stage is and the format of the stage and where the electrical outlets are, and all of those considerations. And really the Chumash representation for the arts concepts, I'm particularly want to highlight that because it's really, I think, best practices for moving forward on major designs like this, honoring all of the history of Santa Barbara and having real input into the design of the plaza. But then with that also we have stakeholder engagement and a member of the committee from the Trust for Historic Preservation, and a lot of conversations along those lines about honoring the sort of historic elements of the plaza, particularly the passive use of it, and not turning it into a playground or something entirely different from how it's sort of been used historically. Also the Office of Arts and Culture, and looking at public art and how this space could be used to really highlight that in that way. And as it lists here in stakeholder engagement and many others, and it's really true, the engagement on this has been impressive, I think. And something else to highlight is something new we've been trying. We've had 2 joint meetings with HLC, so trying to get away from the pattern of doing all this design and then it going to HLC and then them giving input. There have been 2 major meetings along the way to invite collaborative input and to make sure we're not getting too far off base from what HLC might eventually see to approve, and that includes the water feature, which is seen as a cooling feature, and really a lot of consideration to take the HLC input and advisement into account in the plans. So just really want to highlight all of those elements, and then also in the design, the trees and the effect of the cooling effect of those, and a lot of consideration into which type of trees and what that might do for the plaza. And then the lighting, we've seen at those advisory committee meetings, different types of lighting that might be employed there, and really makes it safer. And some of the designs are really lovely, not to get ahead of where that might be heading, but that's a pretty exciting element of it. And then the City Hall part of it, which is under design and isn't settled yet in any way, but the idea is to have it be more open, more inviting, the entrance be really clearly set, and have the public know that they're welcome in, and it's more of a space for that. So those were just some of the considerations along the way that I wanted to highlight, and I think it's been a really collaborative process with it's a large committee, and when we reach consensus on certain items, it's pretty powerful in terms of the community input that's reached to that point. So I'm very pleased with this update and how it's coming along so far, and really find great partners in RM in this project. So thank you.
Further comment? I got a couple little notes then. So I realize today we're not voting or determining design, which is fine, so I'll be supporting the moving ahead. I was on this committee back when Mark Aguilera was running all those years ago, and we tried to do something back then. And I remember the days of Surplicito with King Carlos in, King Carlos out, fountain in, fountain out. Water features in this town are always problematic, and I know these bubble pools use no water. I mean, nothing. But the optics sometimes are what are disturbing. Our fountains in general don't use a lot of water, but we turn them off all the time during drought events, which is like always. So I'm a little concerned about just going ahead and building a water feature into this major structure. Even like I said, I know they're efficient, they don't use a whole lot of water. My second point is on it being a public gathering space, which is the main part and the really historic use of Plaza de la Guerra. And to that end, it should be as open and programmable as possible. And as I look at the design, yeah, I can see Mr. McKay's point about it, maybe especially with it being absolutely no vehicular traffic or parking on De La Guerra. I think that's still a little bit problematic because you've got those businesses, those storefronts on De La Guerra, and if and when the news press ever converts into something more useful than what the building it is today, that's also a potential series of storefronts. So a little concerned about that, a little concerned about the public safety access provision as well. It's always, when you turn something over like a big blank slate to designers, they can't help themselves, but they want to put in a whole bunch of features and furnishings and whatnot, and then we tear a bunch of furnishings out because they got abused. Been around long enough to see all that. So to me, the most programmable, most open, wide open space we could possibly yield out of this, to me, would be the most preferable use out of it, traffic or no traffic. So as we go forward, like I said, I'm certainly supporting the contract because we're not debating design, and I wasn't around for this last series of design iterations. But in the past, in the different iterations I have been involved in, the key was always this, because at one time we thought about putting a big fountain down where the flagpoles are, until there's a couple of folks that like to hang out here yell, "We'll be there when that happens." I mean, in other words, that'll be their new bathing spot. I'm not saying this can happen with the bubble pool, but it is the historic litany of what we've gone through with putting these things in, and benches and seating places always look good on an artist's conception until you have to go out and enforce what happens with those things. So simplicity going forward. I like this whole idea of staging the equipment and the stage on the one side. I think that's a good, really good concept. I like plumbing and the utilities. I think that's all great. Not really sure about your disappearing trash cans, how that's going to work out. That just sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen. But hey, that's not my job. But anyway, those are my 2 cents. Like I said, I'm not here to try to redesign the plaza, but I'm not in love with where we are right now on it in terms of some of these features. So, but I will be supporting going forward. So with that, if there are no further comments, do we have a motion? I know, Ms. Harmon, I don't hate children because I don't want a bubble pool. So you can just save that one. Ms. Sneddon.
I'm happy to move the staff recommendation forward.
Moved by Sneddon.
Second.
Second by Harmon.
Okay.
Passes unanimously with all present, with Michael Jordan absent. Well done. Okay, where does that put us? Okay, we have council and staff communication and also committee assignment reports. Anyone? Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. We had a meeting of the State Street Interim Operations Committee. We were focused on bike solutions, so hopefully some of those trials will be coming soon. We had our homeless ad hoc committee meeting, really sort of looking at finalizing our recommendations before those come to council. I attended, when we were invited last week, to the Santa Barbara City College Umoja mural sort of artist talk. I attended that. It was really well attended. We had our council retreat, of course. HLC, there was a site visit yesterday for Paseo rehab, really, that will be coming to HLC tomorrow for discussion. And then at our sustainability ad hoc committee meeting, we heard and made recommended approval for the Marburg contract, and that'll also be coming to council. And then in addition, outside of that, several of us attended the DEM Women event addressing community violence, and we heard from our DA and from also Board of Supervisor on some issues and help for that in our community.
All right, very good. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. I attended Santa Barbara Beautiful monthly meeting of the Hope School Board last night. The owners of the Macy's parcel at La Cumbre Plaza presented their concept to the Hope School Board, so I was in attendance for that. The DEM Women event on how to prevent violence, I also attended that. It was a great event, and a lot of people showed up, so A lot of good energy, positive energy there. The Sustainability Committee, we voted to forward the Marburg contract to the council, so that will be coming to council. And I want to thank staff for that, and Marburg. They really took to heart a lot of the issues, and we'll be getting a full report at the council and for adoption later at the council. And then also the County School Superintendent, Dr. Sue Salcido, the athletic luncheon honoring women and girls in sports. What an inspirational event. A few hundred women from our local colleges and girls from our local high schools were honored and recognized there. Just an outstanding event, and just thanks to all our student athletes in the community and all they're doing. The chamber did a ribbon cutting for the businesses at La Cumbre Plaza. I was there with Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, and a lot of people showed up for those. The City Library Advisory Board attended that, and then opening night of the film festival. And have been able to go to a couple, but just it's a great event, and it's great to support it. So I encourage everyone to get out and partake in something that is one of the best film festivals in the world at this point. And there's just so many great films. And then also, as Councilmember Snead mentioned, the Homeless Ad Hoc Advisory Committee.
Very good. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also attended the film festival opening night. It was a really good film about the origins of the Miranda rights. Attended the Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting of Mattress Mike's at the old Sears building at La Cumbre Plaza. Attended the council retreat with my colleagues. Attended the Bonet Park community cleanup. Also, the Chinese New Year celebration at City College by the Santa Barbara Association of Chinese members. Attended the e-bike safety training course at Santa Barbara City College, held by SB Bike and the Bicycle Coalition. Attended the Women and Girls Sports Luncheon with my colleagues. And also, I wanted to comment on something that's been happening or been reported on the local press about the violent crimes that have been occurring in our community. I know for a fact that several of us are addressing this issue, and I don't appreciate certain members of the press claiming that we're not, when I think we can all agree that we're all accessible. So at any point, if anyone has any questions about what we're doing or not doing or saying or not saying about what's happening, just ask us. As media, do your job and just reach out to us for comment. Don't assume that we're not doing anything, because a lot of us are going out of our way to make sure it's addressed. That's all I got to say.
All right, very good. We have a closed session. Would you like to read that article?
You do. We have one closed session item tree, that's item 12, and that's a conference with city attorney on existing litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9D1, as described in the agenda.
All right, very good. Just a quick comment. I'd like to, close in recognition and sad recognition in memory of the Michigan State tragedy. That seems like we could close the meeting every week on some new public horror like this. And so I'd just like us all to be conscious of mental health issues, and not that we're going to be able to do anything or pass any laws that are going to make a big difference, but it's something that nationally we have to start taking very, very, very seriously, because it's getting to be every week something else is coming up, and it's not healthy for us. So with that, we're going to adjourn from closed session. We don't anticipate a report out. Thank you.